I work for Salesforce. I'm one of the developer evangelists. I also lead the developer relations team here in the EMEA region. And I want to talk a little bit today about what we're doing with web components. We have a little tradition at Salesforce. Some of you might be Salesforce customers. I know we have at least one ISV. This slide simply says if anyone here is thinking about purchasing Salesforce, that you should make your purchasing decisions only on features that are generally available in our product. And with that taken care of, I can move on. Some of you know this, don't you? Yeah. So I want to talk about what's been going on with us with web components specifically. We've been investing in them. We're moving our user interface in that direction. I want to talk about why we're doing this, what this means for our customers. And when we talk about customers, I do mean customers we sell to directly, and also our ISVs who have developers that are building functionality they're selling to their customers. Also, what's going on with our internal teams with this. And in moving in the direction of web components, what have we learned? And to tell this story, you have to go back a little bit to 2014. It was an exciting time. The web standard looked pretty simple. And at the time, we had launched our new modern user interface called Lightning Experience. And it was built on an open source framework called Aura. We were very excited about this. Of course, we built it based on what was available, and we implemented all the other things that you needed for, at the time, a modern, fully featured user experience and front-end application. And just like all of the other frameworks, we ran into the kind of things that all of those frameworks ran into, in that we ended up building and reinventing a lot of things that other frameworks had done as well. The components that were in our framework were not interoperable with other frameworks, of course. You sort of would learn the framework. Did anyone sound familiar to anybody? As opposed to learning the language. This meant that resources were scarce for our customers. They had trouble hiring people. And of course, when you're building lots of JavaScript on top of the browser platform, it isn't necessarily the fastest thing in the world. Now, the other thing that happened in 2014 is we had this huge sea change happening in the standards bodies for W3C and TC39, where they started to introduce ECMAScript 6. And I can actually remember being just a few blocks from here at what was then called the Angular JS London meetup in 2014. And there's a guy called Peter Bacon-Darwin who came and talked about ECMAScript 6. And it was super exciting to see what was going to be coming. And the cool thing is that we're on the other side of that now. So this was what the web stack looked like in 2014. And nowadays, if you look at what's available in the browser, there's a huge amount of functionality that if you're still using the JavaScript to do this, you're probably not doing yourself a favor. A lot of the things that we were trying to solve for, such as componentization, custom elements, modules, those things are now baked into the browser, as the gentleman who was speaking just before me was talking about. And so if you're going to build a web component framework of today, what is it going to look like? Well, you're going to try and use the features that are in the browser. And then you are really only going to solve for the problems that are unique to you. Now, we've done this. We launched late last year. It's what we call Lightning Web Components. It is a full investment in the Web Components standard. The things for us that are the unique selling points that we need to solve for, one of which is security. Of course, being an enterprise software vendor, security is foremost in the minds of all of our customers, financial services and others. We need to solve for data access. Enterprise software is about nothing if not about data. And so making it stupid easy to be able to access your data is one thing we wanted to give to our developers. And then finally, of course, Salesforce has a whole bunch of standard features in our user interface that we wanted to surface to developers that they could take, pull apart, and recompose into the user interface that would make sense for them, their use case, and their workflow. And so that's really what Lightning Components has become. The core features of Lightning Web Components are really based around enhanced productivity for our developers, about performance, again, going directly to the DOM API, directly to the newer APIs that are in the browser. And the last thing we needed was super important, which is compatibility. I talked about our previous framework, Aura. We had to make sure that in launching this new framework, this new programming model, that we wouldn't break any of the existing investments in any of our customers' user interface that they'd had already. And it's not just been about our developers that are out in our ecosystem, it's also been our internal developers. We had about a 2-year run-up to going public with this, where we were rolling this out to our internal development teams, and they were starting to build with it. And our internal development teams, they build with technology that makes sense for them. So it's been very exciting to see a real high rate of adoption and a standardization around a programming model that works for those development teams. And that incremental process of rolling out has also taught us a lot that helped us roll it out to our customers, as we did a few months ago. So with that, all the run-up to that, it makes sense to move on to a quick demo. So what would a Lightning Web Component look like? So if you take a look at this, the first thing that you notice is that it looks pretty much like standard JavaScript. The first line is simply doing an import, where we're importing some core resources. And one of those resources is called Lightning Element, which we're extending in this class that we then export. Now, a web component or a custom element in the web component standard would extend HTML element. In our case, Lightning Element is itself extending HTML elements. So we basically put a little bit of a wrapper around that encapsulates some of the functionality that we need for our components. And apart from that, this is pretty much a bog standard JavaScript class. We have a property, we have a handler method. The one thing about the property is that we are using a decorator, and that decorator simply makes the property reactive so that as data changes in that property, it's going to update the DOM, which is pretty much what everyone expects from a front-end framework these days. Now, if I look at the actual HTML template behind this, if I can get that to go away, there we go. Again, you can see it's just standard JavaScript on line 1 with the HTML template tag. We have some binding to that greeting property. And we also have what we call our Lightning base components. These are custom elements that we make available to our customers that allow them to recreate the user interface. They encapsulate user interface pieces. In this case, it's just a card element on the user interface. Now, the next one, I talked about data services. And so this next component I just want to show is using those data services to create a very simple amount of code to create an interactive form for entering a contact. Now, it's not an exciting application, but of course it's a very useful one for our customers. And the thing that should stand out to you is that each of these Lightning input fields, again, another base component, are actually all identical apart from the field that they bind to. And what the data service allows us to do is to introspect the metadata of each of these fields so that they respond and they basically become the kind of field that they are. So an account in a contact would be a lookup, a title would probably be a pick list, and email would be an email in that we would do the email hyperlinking, and we would also validate the data when you attempted to save automatically. Incidentally, the button itself doesn't have any handler attached to it through the markup. And if we actually go and look at the JavaScript, you can see there's no handler here either. And that's because this data service automatically surfaces, if you encapsulate these in a particular form control, and you put a submit button on that, it will just automatically do a save operation without having to do anything else. So you don't even have to write the handler for the save. And then each of these services that we're importing that correspond to the fields give us the ability to do a couple of cool things. One of them is that you no longer need to understand the implementation details of our data model. You can import these as standard JavaScript imports. We also do referential integrity checking with these. So if anybody goes and attempts to make changes to the data model, in the environment that this component is in, it's going to prevent them from doing that. All right. So what have we learned? So what we've learned is, and it kind of goes right along the lines of the theme of tonight, standards make a big difference. If you build for the standard, you're going to boost productivity. And certainly in the case of going directly to the browser APIs, you're going to improve performance as well. Also, building for interoperability has helped us gain trust with our customers as we've rolled this out. They know that they're not going to be losing their investment that they've had previously. And then the last thing is to really specialize in the thing that is truly special about your framework. For us, that is our business applications. And for another framework, it might be something else. Now, all the code that I showed here and more is in that bit.ly link right there, which is in a GitHub repo. This is just a simple application called Recipes that has little snippets of code about 30 lines long that show how to solve specific problems with the framework. And with that, thank you.